Chapter 2. Rule 1. Nobody cares about your problems, and you shouldn't either. Lisbon, Portugal. I went to Lisbon right after landing in Faro. Not my best decision. It was out of the way. 3 days out of the way, to be exact. I still thought that the world would save me. Irrational. Nobody gets saved unless somebody else benefits from it. When I got to Lisbon, I immediately went to the U.S. Embassy, the heart of enemy territory. Not that I knew my own country was the enemy. I thought my government would save me. Common American misconception. I met an expat customs agent in a dingy office. No air conditioning, papers strewn about his desk, cold coffee on a stack of documents, half finished, leaving a brown ring on someone's asylum application. The bitter smell of stale coffee was stapled to his words. "When do you get to Portugal?" he asked with a yawn, looking down at his watch. "Tuesday. I flew into Faro." His eyes darted up to meet mine, igniting the way a tiger's do when a raw steak is dropped into their cage at the zoo. He scrambled through the assorted papers on his desk for 10 seconds longer than he should have. "Serves you right, you slob." "Looks like there was only one flight into Faro last Tuesday." "Say, we're looking for an American who flew in. Patrick Parity? He would have been on your flight. You know anything about him?" "Fuck. What do I say?" Uh, yeah. I guess you could say that. It's like this. He's incredibly dangerous," he cut me off. "International fugitive. You're lucky he didn't pull anything on you mid-flight." He chuckled like he'd said something funny, but I couldn't find the joke. Humor is subjective, after all. "Is there anything at all you might have picked up on? We don't have a solid lead just yet." He waited, expecting me to hand him a smoking gun. I didn't. "I've got nothing." "Sorry. I hope you find him, though." "Well, we're working on it. All we know is that he wouldn't come to a place like Lisbon. He'll probably avoid major cities for obvious reasons." The reasons, I realized, were pretty obvious. I just missed them because of my optimism. He must have done a shit job studying my picture, though. My long hair should be a dead giveaway. "If you don't mind me asking, what did he do?" "Killed his entire family. Newborn, too. No remorse either, just up and left. The man's a fucking monster." I breathed out through my nose. "Fuck you." Left the country because he knew he was fucked, probably. I breathed a little harder this time. "What the fuck do you know?" "Don't worry, though. We always find these kinds of people. He probably made it into Spain or France by now, but we'll catch up to him." "We always do," the man said. With that, he excused himself from alertness and took a swig of his coffee. "Right, well, that's good to hear. I gotta ditch. Fast, before he figures it out." I looked down and pretended to get a text message. A classic way of cutting a situation short. "Hey, sorry, sir, but it looks like I have to run, actually," I said. "The wife, you know," I added with a slight shrug. I turned and made my way out the door without another word. Lacking in finesse, perhaps, but certainly efficient. "Wait, sir, what was your name again? I don't think I ever asked," the agent called after me, sounding as bored as an insurance salesman. "It's Pat." The starting gun had fired. I burst through the doors, abandoning the embassy to a savage symphony of yells growing in volume and number. "Move." I raced aimlessly through alleyways and side streets. I'd never even been pulled over for a speeding ticket back home, much less been in a hot pursuit, so I didn't have much of a game plan. The agent's condescending assertion that I would avoid cities gave me an idea, though. The highway. I did a quick Google search. Highways out of Lisbon. I found the A2 motorway that crossed the Tagus River and shot straight out of the city, only 15 minutes away. I'll get there in 5. I reached the Tagus and hurled my phone into the river. Best to get rid of that thing. Then I swam under the cover of the Pont 25 de Abril. What a name for your bridge, huh? I wasn't a swimmer by any stretch, and rivers these days are always full of shit. Still, I looked different soaking wet, and it bought me a little extra time to think. How do I get out of here? Public transport was out. and my Olympic swim was really turning me off from any variation of exercise. The only way of moving that couldn't be easily monitored was hitchhiking. Just stick a thumbs up and wait for a driver. It was a day full of firsts. After 30 minutes of flailing in the muck of the Tagus, I made it across. I stripped my underwear and tried my best to wring out my clothes, but I couldn't rid them of the stink. River water smells like unwashed crotch, but heavier. It's not a great smell. Keeping my shirt in my hand, I ran a little down the highway. The bridge wouldn't work for hitchhiking. I needed an exit where the cars were moving a little slower. I continued the marathon for a couple miles out of Lisbon and found an innocent-looking exit. Perfect. I stood there for a while, smelling like anxious sweat and ballsack, giving Portuguese commuters a nice thumbs up. Unsurprisingly, I had to stand there for a while. I was too tired to care about the authorities. If they find me, I'll probably get a shower at least. Eventually, a shitty red car getting on the motorway flashed his hazards and pulled over. "¿O qué está errado?" the driver asked through a rolled-down window. I stared back blankly. What the fuck was that? I didn't know Portuguese or where I was going, but I knew I needed him to drive me there. "Please," I said, emphatically pointing to the highway, "just take me anywhere but here." He nodded and unlocked his car, and I got in, introducing his leather seats to the stench of the Tagus. The drive to Toledo was quaint, given the circumstances. Beautiful roadside scenery and laughing at each other's languages. Easy going. At least, until I made the mistake of bringing up all the being framed for murder stuff. Not a great topic for first impressions, if you didn't know. It was really all my wife, you see. I wanted a divorce. Sure, not great with a newborn kid and all, but she did cheat on me. I was going to do my best with our little Kenny, too. Sebastian nodded when I glanced his way. He was the kind but dim man who drove me to Toledo. You have to be a perfect mix of kind and dim to pick up a hitchhiker. Luckily, Sebastian was. He listened to my story with nothing but nods of his head, each getting more frightened than the last. The language barrier might have been an issue, but I'm positive he got the gist. So, Mary Beth decides to kill herself. I know, I told you she was crazy. It was elaborate, too. She wanted me to get screwed over, right? God, what a bitch. I started raising my voice. Sebastian nodded. She told me she was moving out after the divorce. Reasonable enough, right? I mean, I didn't think she'd stay. She asked me to help her buy a gun, which I also thought was reasonable. Over here, that probably doesn't make much sense, but in America, guns equal freedom. Don't ask me why, that's just how it is. Plus, Marybeth was going to be living alone. And not in a great area either. Downtown St. Pete, if you know where that is. No? It's fine, most people don't. But sure, that's reasonable, right? I had no problem getting her a gun, and I was always good for guns too. A great shot and all whenever I'd go to the range. Anyways, the idea made sense for me to help her get one, right? Sebastian nodded. So I helped her. I picked out the gun and the ammo and all that. Nothing special, Springfield XDS with some solid Winchester 9mm bullets. Hell, I even bought the thing for her because she didn't want to go to the shop. Very reasonable, actually. Next thing I know, about 2 days later, she walks into the kitchen when I'm feeding Kenny. It's the morning, maybe like 9, and she was supposed to move out a couple days later. Kenny was the cutest when he ate, I always thought. He got so messy every time, like a painter after a day in the studio. So I'm feeding him applesauce, and it's all over his face. I was laughing, and he was just old enough to laugh back, so he was. I never got real father-son talks or anything, but stuff like that made me really feel like a good dad, you know? Anyways, the two of us were laughing when Mary Beth came in. She had these new yellow dishwashing gloves. I'd never seen them before, but it wasn't hard to understand why. Her McDonald's yellow gloves were gripping the Springfield. I was stunned, and I yelled, asking what she was doing, even though it was clear as day. Sebastian nodded. She didn't answer with words. It was just a horrible laugh. Her eyes were wide, looked like they were going to jump out of their sockets. Her lips were dry and her mouth wouldn't shut, and that awful cackle just kept leaking out. She lifted her arm, and shot Kenny right in the face. Before I could even think of what to say. He was 2 months old. Applesauce and brain bits splattered all over his high chair, and I tried to scream and I tried to cry, but all that came out of my mouth was a puff of air. I shut my eyes so tight that I thought they might never open again, and part of me wishes they never did. Sebastian nodded. But they did. I looked at Mary Beth. She didn't have anything but bloodlust in her eyes, popping out, veins about to burst, nothing left to live for, the distillation of existential dread. I knew I was fucked. She stared at me as I put my hands in the air and mouthed a feeble please. She cocked the gun. It was pointed right at my face, and for a second, our wedding day began to almost blend with real life. An image of an altar and a priest, a man and a woman, some flowers and marble floors, and the promise of some 9mm holes in my head. Not really what I expected from Till Death Do Us Part. Sebastian nodded. But instead of unloading a round of lead into my skull, Mary Beth put her lips around the barrel. Her final act was sucking off the Springfield, which is fitting in a way. Again, I didn't have time to think. Before I had the chance, she'd chosen a deep shade of maroon for the fridge. She dropped to the ground. The gun slid across the floor to my feet when her arm thumped against the tile. After that, I was able to scream and cry, and I did both. Sebastian nodded. I called the police when I stopped wailing. I reported a suicide homicide, but I couldn't bear to talk, so I just hung up. I sat at my kitchen table and looked at the fucking shit show of a life my wife had just made for me. She blew her own brains out after popping our kid's face like a fucking water balloon and left me there to sit and enjoy the scenery. I went to clean Kenny's bowl. Not like there was any right thing to do, you know? I picked the bowl up off the floor and took it to the sink. Mary Beth had done half the dishes already. The gloves, the gun. I'd left it on her dresser after I bought it. I bet she never touched the damn thing. My fingerprints were all over the gun, and hers probably weren't. It really looked like I'd shot them both while she was doing the dishes. Fuck. She set me up. Sebastian nodded. So I left. Wasn't a smart choice, more of a panicked frenzy. What are you supposed to do when you can't think clearly, though? I got in my car and drove to the Tampa airport, booked a flight on the drive. Didn't care where, just international. That's how I ended up here. In your car, I guess. That's me, though. Sorry for talking your ear off, I said with a chuckle. So, what's your story, Sebastian? Sebastian stopped the car and pointed to the door. We were on the middle of the highway still, but his quivering arm spoke the unmistakable words, "Get the fuck out." I opened the door and Sebastian pushed me. More of a weak shove, but I exaggerated to make him feel better. He slammed the door as my knees smacked the patchy grass median. We were only 10 kilometers out of Toledo. Not bad. Probably, I would have done the same thing as Sebastian. He could barely speak English. I can't imagine that he woke up that day wanting to play chauffeur for an internationally wanted criminal. Most people don't. Sebastian did nothing wrong. I did. I made my way across the road from the median, and I realized I was pissed at my government. I felt abandoned by my country. What about my basic human fucking rights? I'd always felt as if the world was bound by some supreme ethical code to exonerate the innocent. With my bruised knees on that crumbling Spanish highway, my optimistic view seemed farther from the truth than I was from home. The wealthy steal from their workers, and the powerful bully the powerless. And nobody knows if there's a devil in hell who'll make them pay for their sins once it's all over. Besides, the evidence pointed toward me being a murderer, a psychotic, brutal one at that. It's not a great idea to just hear out psychotic murderers, less so when there's evidence against them. Due process is another one of those things that people only care about when it's useful. As I walked down the highway toward Toledo for the rest of the day, I probably wasted half the water reserves in my body on tears. Some fell between clenched fists, and others dripped down onto sunken cheeks. I was a real pendulum ride of emotions that afternoon. My pathetic promenade would have been great as a case study for Kubler-Ross's 5 stages. Why the fuck is this happening to me? Me, damn it! I mean, what the hell did I ever do to deserve this shit? I was drunk on despondence, audibly cursing everything around. The baby blue road signs that led me toward Toledo, the jagged rocks on the road's shoulder that I sporadically kicked into oblivion, and especially the God who decided to make my life a sequel to the Book of Job all of a sudden. Eventually, reality crystallized. I'm stuck in this now. I had no way out and no idea where I was going. Well, past Toledo, that is. Who's gonna help me? Fuck. Why would anyone help me? Fuck. I was, very literally, the only one on the planet that cared at all. If nobody will, why should I? I deduced that staying alive and undetected would be a lot easier if I wasn't bitching and moaning to random shitheads who picked me up on the highway. Thank you, Sebastian. I'd get nowhere but the electric chair by optimistically parading into every US embassy I passed, hoping for them to hear me out. So yeah, I was the one to live. Mary Beth died. Sure, our marriage was shit. She lied to me, she manipulated me, and she hurt me more than anyone else I've met. Still, there was a day in a botanical garden in Tampa that I stared into her ivy green eyes and thought they put the rest of the world to shame. I loved her so much. She was the mother of my kid, and she's dead. Kenny. I miss him every single day. I never got to be a father, really. I never had the chance to coach Kenny's baseball team, take Kenny to the movies on a Sunday morning, to pick Kenny up after he got hammered at a high school party. I never got to teach Kenny how to be generous, to approach new people and things with an open mind, to dream big, and to never give up on those crazy dreams. I was never able to watch Kenny grow up and become a better man than I could ever be. And I never got to lay in a hospital bed before my final journey and tell Kenny how proud of him I was and how caring for him let me live 1,000 lifetimes. I loved him more than life. He was my son, and he's dead. So yeah, I lived that morning. I think, though, that nobody made it out of that kitchen. For a while, I struggled to stay human. I put faith in the world and desperately clung to the hope that things work out for good people, at least in the end. It wasn't immediate or anything, but on that walk to Toledo, I finally lost that part of the soul that makes a person, well, a person. It's that assumption that doing the right thing, being a good person, and caring about others makes a difference. That holds humanity upon its shoulders like Atlas held the weight of the world. Trust me, I know how heavy that feels. Without that assumption, though, moral systems all crumble into a pool of goo, with about as much structural integrity as applesauce and brain bits trickling down the sides of a high chair.